Okay, so when we're talking about how to protect your mental health in relation to rising Islamophobia, I think my advice goes out to Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Because when you talk about Islamophobia, or you talk about a lot of anger, a lot of hatred, a lot of injustice toward Muslims, a lot of discrimination, I think it's not just up to the Muslims to stand up against it. I think it's up to Muslims and non-Muslims alike. And for the non-Muslims, I think it's important to consider privilege and power. And one of the reasons why we don't stand up for people who are different from us is because we're not affected by their suffering, or at least we believe we're not affected by their suffering. But we're all living in the same society, and we all benefit from justice and equality and peace in that same society. And I think that when you're in a position of privilege, when you're in the majority in a particular group, you can be disincentivized to stand out and to act out and to speak out and to speak on behalf of a group that's being discriminated against or oppressed or the victim of some sort of prejudice, because that means that you're putting in jeopardy your own privilege. And you can be, I mean, we found this a lot during the civil rights movement, right? Whites who were in favor of supporting the rights of blacks during that time, they were equally as targeted. And I think that we tend to be in one of those two camps if you're not a Muslim. Either it doesn't affect me or it doesn't concern me, or I'm afraid that the injustice will then be turned toward me. And this piece of advice really comes for the Muslim and the non-Muslim alike. We need to do a better job of supporting each other and speaking out. The Muslim and the non-Muslim alike standing together, saying we're all in this together, we're all going to support you together, and if any harm is going to come to you, we're going to be there to defend you, and you're going to be here to defend us. And so that there's a real power and efficacy in numbers. I think for the Muslims, what's important for us to understand is that we do need to band together. We do need to support one another, be more vocal, but be more active in our supporting of one another. Whenever we hear about an injustice, not only are we making statements about it, but we're actually going out and doing something about it. We're lobbying for our government. We're lobbying local government. We're out in the communities where these people are being discriminated against. We're going to the workplaces and things like that. We're not afraid to go and speak out wherever that might be and to demonstrate our displeasure and to make our demands and our expectations for public addressing of whatever it is that happened, responsibility and culpability, all of these things. I think that we need to exercise our power as citizens, but also draw upon the religious examples that we have. I think that in the tradition of all of the Abrahamic religions, and certainly in the Quran, where God, he talks over and over about what each of the nations of the prophets went through in terms of their wanting to worship God and wanting to be obedient to God and dutiful and following the examples of their prophets. And of course, you'll find this in the same way when we talk about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when you talk about his experience and what the experiences of the early Muslims were. What lessons can we take away from what the early days of Islam were like for them? And how they were patient through it, how they were vocal through it, how they prayed through it, and how they stuck together through it. When they had power and when they did not have power, what are the ways in which they advocated for themselves? What are the ways in which they empowered themselves and banded together as a community? Those are the lessons I think are important for us to take away from the rise of Islamophobia. We're not going through anything that any group has never gone through before, and taking from the historical lessons can help us understand what are the most successful vehicles within our religion, within our culture, to actually combat that and overcome that.